In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the FLAFFL House Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cotillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is Tuesday, November 15th, and this is the FLAFFL House Fantasy Football Podcast. What's up, guys? We're back together. Wait, Steve? Steve, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're here, right?
I'm always here.
You are
I'm always
here.
here.
And I'm here. This is Wally Central, Kevin Cotillo here.
Yep. Sal.
Where's Sal?
Not here.
Did he not make it?
Again. You know, he did not make it tonight, and I think we've got a classic case of sometimes when you get up there to a certain age, even vacation can wear you out. So, he went on vacation. He went hard last week in the most magical place on earth, came back, did the podcast, and I think it just took too much out of him. I think he's been in bed the last couple of days.
Yeah, look, I wanna squash the rumors before they really get started because I'm sure people are starting to wonder. And the answer to everyone's question is yes. Sal and I just cannot be on the podcast together anymore. We've decided, Steve, much like parents who are getting divorced, we didn't want to tell you until it was official. But
I understand.
That's
who's hurt the most in this? It's me.
Yeah, yes, you.
It's me.
You're being passed back and forth like a. I don't know where I'm going with that, but
something that's not good
to
be passed back and forth.
Exactly.
We can just leave it at that.
We'll just leave it at that. Now, listen, that's not true, obviously. Sal and I can get along very well. He is not here tonight. He did have some other things to take care of, so it's you and I again, Steve. We held down the fort for a week. We can do it for another night.
That's right. This is becoming commonplace and nothing new. So I think we are well equipped to handle such a task.
I agree. We will hopefully welcome Sal back later on this week. But for tonight, we have a pretty action-packed show for you. I am back, so I am excited to be here. I am ready to go. As I mentioned, I am at Wally Central on Twitter. You can follow the show at FLAFFL House on Twitter. You can follow Steve at Sid Skeet on Twitter. And, of course, you can follow Sal at Lito Sal on Twitter as well. Also want to urge everyone to check out the Fantasy Life app. That is where we were born, Steve. We were born on the app.
You don't have to tell me. I remember. I remember.
Our league was started there, which spawned into a podcast, a website. Oh, hey, Steve, we have a website. You want to tell people about the website?
Absolutely. FLAFFLhouse.com, where you can find all kinds of weekly articles. We got Start Sit. We've got previews for every game. We've got DFS articles, betting articles, if that's your cup of tea. All kinds of stuff coming out every single day. So our ranks, of course, you can't forget about the ranks. Those are also up there. Just a good place to go check out. You can find the podcast. It's just a good fantasy hangout. So, yeah, go there.
It is a good time. You should also, as I mentioned, the Fantasy Life app, go to the FLAFFL House chat and check us out because we're always in there. And you can get some great advice on there, anywhere on the app, really, but definitely the FLAFFL House chat. All right, Steve. So we're going to do some news tonight. Obviously, no games tonight. There were games last night. It was an interesting one.
It was very quick out the gates, a lot of scoring early and then kind of fizzled out a little bit towards the end. But yeah, it was a good one. Giants sealing the victory. Primetime Andy Dalton doing what he does best, throwing some interceptions. So yeah, it was a fun one. Good football all around this week.
I like primetime Andy Dalton. He's good for the league.
Nah, I don't know about that. I don't know.
All right.
You lose a lot of faith in primetime Andy once he gets on a Monday night game.
At least it was a good Monday night game. Lots of fantasy action going on. I'm sure a lot of people had multiple players. So we'll get into some news from the rest of the league and, that occurred, some stuff to catch up on from the weekend. You guys did a great job on Sunday covering the games, but there is definitely news that comes out on Tuesday. Seems like that's a big day to really catch up.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
A lot of stuff to talk about. So we'll also go through some waiver wire ads. We know that as this typically comes to your inbox on Wednesday mornings, a lot of waivers transactions have been completed, but for hopefully some of those still might have guys that have moves to make. And if not, at the very least, maybe you can snag some of these guys from free agency, which would be good. We also got a quick game we'll play a little later on. Little A versus B, Steve.
I'm ready to play.
Are you?
Practicing? I've been practicing, and
yourself?
I'm ready to go.
It seems weird considering it's a game where you're not supposed to know the two players involved.
It has made things a little difficult. I don't know if it's helped at all, but I got to spend my time somehow.
I appreciate you putting in the effort, though. So for now, let's get into the news. The big one tonight, I think, at least the big one, we can debate. I think the first two, which one's bigger. But for me, the big one today was Christine Michael cut by the Seahawks.
Yeah, very surprising. You heard the rumors and the murmurs that Thomas Rawls was getting close and was going to come back. CJ Prosise has definitely come on the last few weeks, but Christine Michael has been very serviceable for the Seahawks this year. So for him to just be flat out cut was very surprising, very unexpected. I guess they just assumed that he didn't really serve any type of purpose for special teams. Otherwise, they don't really have reason to hold 3 running backs on their active roster. So, yeah, he was let go. And very surprising. I agree. I was pretty shocked to read that today as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when Pete Carroll was asked about the running back rotation. I think it was yesterday, and he didn't mention Christine Michael at all. People thought that was a little strange until you find out today that he gets cut. Obviously, Prosise looks really good. He had a good game against the Patriots, great in the receiving game. So you got to figure he's going to be continued in that regard. And as you mentioned, Thomas Rawls coming back. So Christine Michael having a rough go of it the last few games anyway. He had several games with a yards per carry average under 4. Scored a couple of touchdowns, so he's still sort of fantasy relevant. But I think we talked about it. He hadn't had a good fantasy day or good actual rushing day since back in week 3 against San Francisco. And we all know about now how bad San Francisco is against the run. So, that game he had 20 carries for 106 yards, finally had a 5.3 average, and he had two touchdowns. But when you look at that compared to the rest of the season, it makes sense that he had that great of a day. And that's not even a great day against San Francisco, considering what some other people have done.
Yeah, his production was definitely going down the tubes, and you knew that he was going to be in danger of losing his job once Rawls came back. I just think the severity of it is what was most surprising.
Absolutely, yeah. So, all right, so Christine Michael gone. Are you starting Thomas Rawls this week?
I will try not to start him this week. I'd like to see how he plays. I actually think that CJ Prosise will probably be the lead back this first week just because they want to try to see, you got to try to limit Rawls. He's coming off of an injury last season, came back, got hurt again, so now he's going to be coming back a second time already. They got to try and make sure he's fresh for their playoff run.
I tend to agree with you on that one. Prosise looked good, as I mentioned, against New England, mostly in the passing game. Because, in the rushing game, he was okay. 3.8 yards per carry. He had 17 carries for 66 yards, so not exactly what you want to see there. But the Patriots are pretty decent against the run. So, makes sense there. But I do think that he'll get the majority of the touches. So, Philadelphia, not a great matchup, but Tampa Bay and then Carolina coming up. So we'll see what happens as this shakes out. Moving along to the second piece of news. And again, Steve, this one may be more important for you because I know you and I have talked about him quite a bit this year. Alshon Jeffrey suspended for performance-enhancing drugs. Look, the guy could never stay on the field. He finally stays somewhat healthy for the season, totally underperforms, and then gets popped for PEDs. What are you going to do with this guy?
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And, it explains why he wasn't on the injury report for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Because he's been, rubbing the old cream on the hamstrings, as Barry Bonds would say.
Or the old deer antler. Wasn't that Ray Lewis?
Ray Lewis
Yeah.
with the deer antler spray. That's right. Yep. It's just so frustrating. Like you said, he's taken PEDs, is finally healthy, and does absolutely nothing, and now he's going to be gone for the last 4 games. So right when you thought there might be a little bit of hope with Jay Cutler coming back, he's going to get all the volume, his touchdowns are going to come back, that just all of it's gone. He's not going to be eligible to come back until week 15. So, 2 weeks before your fantasy season's over, probably not going to feel comfortable rolling him right back out there week 15. That's just basically a lost season for him now. And unfortunate for him on his side, in real life, his contract year is going to take a pretty big hit for whoever's going to sign him next year. It's just stupid. These players are stupid. I don't understand. He owned up to it, but how can you just not pay attention to what you're putting it on or around or in your body? I don't understand it. It's stupid.
I think it's pretty clear they pay attention. They know what they're doing. Though that's always an excuse. It's kind of what you have to say at this point. I mean, I think you try to get away with something, and then when you get caught, you say, "Oh, I should have paid better attention to what it was." These guys know.
Idiots.
Yeah.
Idiots.
And if they don't know, then they are idiots, because they should be having someone review that for them every time. So. All right, so Alshon Jeffrey didn't look good anyway against Tampa Bay, who makes every receiver look good. He only had 4 catches for 47 yards, so not moozling much. This might actually help some people. I know that luckily I actually traded him right before this week, so that worked out well for me. But for you, Steve,
absolutely,
maybe you can not play him anymore and feel okay with it. So it helps.
Oh, maybe I can not play him. You're right. I've not really considered whether or not I'm going to bench him or not this week. So I'm still up in the air on that one.
Maybe is not the right word. Obviously, you're benching him. I'm saying now it's actually easy to do so. You don't have to think about it. Is my point.
Nope. He is on I have to think about whether or not I'm going to keep him at all.
That's true. Yeah.
So
that's all. When he lands on the Patriots next year, he's going to be quite the keeper. So you may want to think about that.
That's very true. I'll have to think long and hard.
So speaking of the Patriots, Rob Gronkowski, Steve, does he have a punctured lung? I can't tell anymore.
I am not a doctor, but I'll tell you, I wanted to ask you, did the entire stadium just go absolutely silent when he just got rumbled by Earl Thomas on that hit? I can just imagine just like instant silence and everyone just staring.
It was the collective, like all at once, and then dead silence is what it was. It's
that was a nasty hit. It was awesome.
Nasty hit. To his credit, he said it was the hardest he's ever been hit on a football field, which is impressive. And he said it was a clean hit, good clean hit. So good for him for not being a baby about it and complaining like most people would. So I appreciate that.
Yep.
But the news came out that maybe he had a punctured lung. Then Adam Schefter said he didn't have a punctured lung. Then RotoWorld's now reporting that he can't fly to some EA Sports event that he was going to do. So because of his, the air pressure. So it sounds like he does have a punctured lung. I don't know. I really don't know. And good luck finding out before this game. Obviously, we'll know if he doesn't make the trip to San Francisco. They are on the road. It's a long flight. So I'm guessing if he can't fly, that's going to be a tough one. But definitely keep an eye on that, because obviously makes a huge deal. I mean, Gronkowski is usually very solid when he's in there, but even more so if he's not. Martellus Bennett is a great play this week.
Yeah, you saw the game that he just had against Seattle, and you saw how productive he was in the games without Gronkowski when he was dealing with an injury earlier in the season. He's just a great tight end, an instant fill-in for anybody that that has him, that has Gronk, that has someone else that might not be playing this week. There's some other tight ends on bye. So yeah, Martellus Bennett, if Gronk is out, is an instant tight end one.
So definitely keep an eye on that. It doesn't sound like it'll be a long-term injury, so at least you'll have Gronkowski back, hopefully. So, all right, Steve, it finally happened, and for those of us who listen to another podcast that we like, the Matthew Berry podcast, he's a friend of their podcast. So and he's been kind of a running joke through a lot of different platforms, including the Fantasy Life app. Blair Walsh is finally released by the Vikings.
Yes, very, very sad. Everyone's going to remember him for his missed field goal at the end of the playoff game last year, which they could have beat the Seattle Seahawks. But man, he's missed a lot of extra points this season, and I can't really blame the Vikings. It's become a problem. So it's unfortunate, but it is a business, and they got to try and do what they can to help them out. I'm sure Blair Walsh will get another job. He's a pretty darn good kicker when things are going right for him.
Yeah, these guys get stuff in their head, man, and it just goes downhill quick. And some of them rebound. And hopefully he will rebound and get another job. I'm sure he'll be on a roster somewhere at some point. So,
yep, he will be back.
Jared Goff is finally going to start for the Rams, which subsequently means they are benching Case Keenum. Do you care about this? Is this news even? I mean, I put it on here, so I guess it's something.
It is news. I mean, it's happening in the world of the NFL, so it is news. I don't know what it really means. Can the Rams players really take much more of a hit than they've been dealing with all season? Kenny Britt, his production, even though he did have a really good game this last week, for the most part, has kind of taken a dip. Tavon Austin has not really been the receiver that we all kind of thought he was going to be this year. Although I would expect them, I would expect them to use him a little more with the trick plays this week to try and lighten Jared Goff's load and help the defenses try to stay back a little bit.
Wouldn't you have done that with Case Keenum though? It's not like he was any better.
Yeah, I don't. Jeff Fisher had some weird type of faith in Case Keenum that was unfounded, but it'll be interesting. I can only hope for the best. You can only hope that things get better and that the reasons that they drafted Jared Goff come out and you're able to see them on the field.
So I'm going to go ahead and plug another podcast again. The Fantasy Footballers, if you haven't checked out their podcast, you definitely should. It's good information. They're very entertaining. But they had Eric Dickerson on, the running back from the Rams, and former running back, I should say. And he was talking about, this is totally a tangent, has nothing to do with Jared Goff, although it kind of does. But he was talking about Todd Gurley and just, for a former running back who was obviously great, to talk about how bad their offensive line is and how many guys Todd Gurley is seeing in the box because of how bad the quarterback play has been. It was very interesting. I would just recommend checking it out because it does not give you much hope for Todd Gurley going forward. And I don't point that out to rub it in your face, Steve, I promise.
Yeah, I strongly doubt that. Strongly doubt that.
But it is relevant because with Jared Goff taking over, you got to figure that's not going to change much. At least in the beginning, maybe Jared Goff comes in and lights the world on fire somehow. Although Dickerson also did say that he really wasn't very good in preseason either. So we'll see what happens there, Steve. Maybe there is light for Todd Gurley at some point.
We shall have to see. Like you said, things can't not get much worse for the Rams, so they don't really have much more. They don't have anywhere else to go but up.
Speaking of which, I know I'm tangenting a little bit here tonight, but you got the win, Steve.
Yeah, I did.
Wasn't mentioned on the podcast because
weeks
wasn't over, but the drought is finally over.
That's right. I've been drunk since Monday night. Didn't even stop for this podcast.
Fantastic.
So, yep, quality.
Awesome. Well, good for you. Congratulations. We are all happy that you finally got off the snide there after 8 long weeks.
8 weeks in a row, 8 losses. I am still in last place. We will see what happens. 3 weeks to go until the regular season ends. We're going to see what happens.
Yeah. You know who didn't get off the snide this week?
Who's that?
Sammy Coates.
No, he did not.
Still catchless. That's 2 games in a row now for Sammy Coates against Baltimore and Dallas. Last 2 games. Only 6 targets overall. He only had 1 target in this last game against Dallas. He apparently has 2 broken fingers, so I guess that might be the reason why. Tomlin's coming out in his defense. Sammy Coates is talking about his broken fingers a little bit. I mean, I could see why if you had 2 broken fingers, you wouldn't be able to catch the ball. Makes sense.
It does make sense.
But then why play? I mean, it's so irritating as a Sammy Coates owner to have 2 goose eggs in a row.
Yeah, 2 goose eggs in a row. I started him on my Scott Fishbowl team, I believe, the last 2 weeks as well. So I've got 2 healthy fingers, and they are pointing right back at you, Sammy Coates. why don't you go ahead and take a week off, buddy, and let those fingers get better so you can catch on to whatever balls do actually get thrown your way. And it's very, like you said, very frustrating when you're hurt and it's affecting your play on the field. You need your fingers to catch the ball, so get those right so you can actually help your team.
Yeah, sit down so we don't start you and then get nothing. That's what
Exactly.
I would like. That's what I would appreciate. Because in a 16-team league, you get a goose egg the week before, you think to yourself, all right, he can't do it twice. So
Yeah,
apparently he
no.
can.
Yeah, he can.
RG3 might actually practice this week. He's been out for a while now. I don't even remember which week he got hurt. Was it week 1?
Yeah, I think it was
the
the first week of the season.
So he's been out since week 1, and he's might return to practice. It's not even definite, but he's going to have some tests done, might return to practice this week. Cleveland's quarterback play has been awful. So it could be the worst in the league besides the Rams, I think.
Yeah, it has not been very good at all. I think if he comes back and he gets cleared and he's healthy, he probably just steps right back in and takes over. I think Hugh Jackson likes him enough to do that, even with a rookie quarterback playing and being benched and then being named the starter again this week. I think RG3 would take over all of that. I doubt he comes back this week at all, and I wouldn't be taking any kind of fantasy chances on him whenever he does come back.
No, absolutely not. But I do think it has some relevancy for Corey Coleman and Terrell Pryor. I think that they get a little bit of an uptick if he's in, sadly enough, because, well, for one, for Terrell Pryor, he can start running down the field again. It's been a little while. Cody Kessler, not exactly the guy to drive the ball down the field. And then Coleman, you'd think there's some familiarity there and potentially could have a little bit more impact with 2 different receivers instead of just throwing to the first read every time. So we'll see. What happens with RG3, just something to keep an eye on there. And finally here, Matt Jones' status. It really depends on whether or not they need help on special teams, Steve. How sad is that?
That got pretty sad pretty quick
really
for Matt Jones.
Really?
But with Robert Kelly, the way that he's been playing, I'm going to talk about him coming up here in a little bit. I can't say I disagree with the decision at all. I mean, you've got him and Chris Thompson that definitely have their roles cut out. Matt Jones just could not hang on to the ball. And if you're going to be turning the ball over consistently in this league, you're not going to last very long. So, I mean, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're giving the ball up to the other team, you're not helping your team out enough. And this is the kind of thing that happens. We've seen it a lot before. It's just it's crazy to see, when it actually goes down.
Yeah, it is. I mean, nothing much to say there. You hope that maybe he gets a chance at some point and shines again, because there's definitely some talent. So we will see there. That's about it for the news from me, Steve. Anything I missed?
Nope, you covered my falafel win, so I think we got it all.
Absolutely. It's the only thing that's important, right?
This week, yes. As the weeks narrow down, yes, they are becoming increasingly important.
They are becoming increasingly important. So let's continue to move on to waiver wire ads. You have been at the bottom of the waiver wire list pretty much all year, but I think that means you can make additions anytime you want, which is irritating.
Yes, actually, the way our waivers are set up, you make a claim, you go to the back of the line. I have found myself towards the bottom, and about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I kind of just said, screw it. I'm going to make claims every single week because I know everyone's going to be holding out, waiting for that one guy. And I had needs on my team, so I was able to cycle through a bunch of people. I ended up picking up Jack Doyle. I've gotten CJ Fedorowicz. I got the Texans defense last week, which I thought was a pretty good one to shore up my defense for the rest of the season. So yeah, pretty convenient strategy, I think, and it's been very helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what the worst position is? 2. I've been stuck on 2 all year, and I can't make a claim because, then I fall all the way down, and I can't not, even if someone showed up, I wouldn't be the first one, so it sucks.
That is rough. That is rough.
I will persevere. We will help you guide yourself through your waiver wire ads if you are still able to make them. Steve, why don't you start off and give me your list of guys that you like for this week?
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with some running backs real quick. I'll talk about Thomas Rawls, who we mentioned earlier. We had the news of Christine Michaels being cut. Thomas Rawls is a big, strong, or not big, but he's a strong runner, hard-hitting back, very fun to watch. But because of his hard running ability, he lends himself to getting injuries, which is what we've seen so far in his career. I'm going to add him every chance that I can get because I think that he is eventually going to be this first and second down back for Seattle. And I think that when Seattle starts to turn it on and make this run like we've seen them start to do these last couple of weeks, that running back becomes a very usable fantasy player, and Thomas Rawls can be very productive in that role. I've also got Robert Kelly, guy that we were just talking about. He's only 45.4% owned. Not sure why he's not owned in every league. He is a starting running back for an NFL team. I believe I saw a stat from him the other day saying that for his 90 NFL rushes he's had so far this season, only 2 of them have gone for negative yards. So he is getting, he's getting good push. His line is getting good push. He's not losing any yards. And so it's just he's a very solid running back. He's been a top 20 running back in standard scoring over the last 4 weeks. So he's just right in the middle of the pack, RB2. Just a guy that you can,
Interesting enough, if you look at Pro Football Reference under his profile, they sometimes they'll give a nickname. His nickname is Fat Rob.
Yeah, it ain't bad.
Yeah, just Fat Rob. That's it.
All right, Fat Rob. I like it. I'm going with it.
6 feet, 228 pounds. Over 4 yards per carry in the last 2 games against what were supposedly difficult defenses, Cincinnati and Minnesota. So he's definitely turning it around. I like the no negative yardage stat that you gave there because I've seen that too, and that's great. Not really using the passing game, which does kind of hurt him, but.
Yeah, they have Chris Thompson there for that role, so he's not going to get a lot of passes, not going to be using the screen game, anything like that, but very solid runner, and I mean, he's going to be their goal line back, so you always like having those types of backs. What kind of running backs are you looking at, Kev?
For running backs, for me, I like James Starks this week at 20. He's currently owned for ESPN 29.4%. Obviously, he is the running back to own in Green Bay. I think you and Sal talked about it a little bit on Sunday. Ty Montgomery not really being used now that Starks is back. So he's a guy, look, I think we all know that the talent of James Starks isn't great. He's had some good flashes, in games before, but he's also been very mediocre. But as you say, he is a starting running back on an NFL team, and that holds some value. I like Kenneth Dixon, as I always have liked Kenneth Dixon. Continue to say you should own him. He is owned in only 10.5% of leagues currently. So he is a guy that I think has to be owned. You have to pick him up. You look at his, his production over the season really isn't that great. But if you look at that, the Pittsburgh game, I think it was, where he had, only 9 rushes for 13 yards, so didn't really do anything there. I'm sorry, it's the Cleveland game, where he had 6 rushes, 38 yards, but he also had 5 catches for 42 yards in the passing game. So he didn't score, he didn't get in the end zone. They're still using Terrence West. I get all that, but he is the talented guy. We've been saying it since before the season. We've been saying it since the draft. Steve,
Yep.
I've been talking about this guy way too long.
Yes, you have.
It's time for him to finally take over. He's got some decent matchups, or some tougher matchups, I should say, throughout the rest of the season. But I think he's just going to slowly take over the role, and I still see it happening. So he's a guy I think you have to get now, especially since he's only 10% owned. Outside of that, Damian Williams is a guy, if you're a Jay Ajayi owner. Obviously, he vultured a couple touchdowns. He's not really doing much in the running game outside of that, but I still think you need to own him if you're a Jay Ajayi owner, because with Jay Ajayi's production currently, you might as well have someone that's going to fill that role if he's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk some wide receivers. Who do you got?
All right, for wide receivers, I'm going to go ahead and say Cameron Meredith, someone who's already been a popular ad earlier in the year, but he definitely cooled off when Alshon Jeffrey started coming on a little bit. It's going to be Cameron Meredith, 20.3%. Now that we know with Alshon's hamstrings fully healthy, but because of the drugs, he's not going to be around. Cameron Meredith, he's going to be the guy, the wide receiver, I think, that gets the biggest boost. A lot of people are going to talk about Eddie Royal. We've talked about how Eddie Royal operates on this podcast many times. So I think Cameron Meredith will be the biggest beneficiary. I also think that Zach Miller is going to get a big bump He is owned in 69% of leagues, so a little too much to talk about here, but he is available, so you might want to go look to see if he's there. But Cameron Meredith, I think that he is going to be a guy that is going to see a huge uptick in volume and see the lion's share of the targets now that Alshon Jeffrey is not in there. And then a deeper guy, someone who's not going to help you this week or maybe not even next week, but for the playoffs would be Sammy Watkins. He's only 30% owned, not eligible to return, like I said, until early next week at the earliest. But once he does come back, he is going to be the best wide receiver in that Bills offense. And if he's actually healthy, this dude is extremely talented. And he's not only injury prone, he's actually a really good wide receiver as well. So when he is healthy, if he is able to come back from this foot injury and produce in this offense, he would be a huge steal and someone that could help you win a championship, because we've seen at the end of last season what he can do when things are going right for him. So those are some wide receivers I like to add this week.
All right, and a couple of guys a little bit further down the line for me. Robert Woods, 16.3% of leagues, has had some pretty good games overall, and just not getting the ownership because he's on Buffalo, and he's on Buffalo. I don't really know what else to say there, but he had 16 fantasy points against Seattle, 10 catches, 162 yards, and then they go on the bye week. Sammy Watkins is still not back, so with Tyrod Taylor looking better each game, and the running game, obviously with you expect more out of LaShawn McCoy coming off of the injury, but Robert Woods is a guy that's going to see production. He's going to see targets because there's no one else in that offense. So Robert Woods definitely a guy I would consider. Another guy that I'm looking at, Taylor Gabriel, and I say this, but I will also caution you. Go ahead and grab him if you have the open roster spot, but be wary about what his production is going to be, and don't start him right away because with Tevin Coleman coming back, it could eat into what he does. He's been running a lot. I mean, look, he runs the deep routes. The guy's incredibly fast. Just a speed demon overall. He's got a 17.8 yards per reception average. So he's getting downfield. He's had some big plays, but he's also running some of those wheel routes and things like that you might see Tevin Coleman take over once he comes back. But I still think this guy needs to be added, especially with the last two games that he has had. 13 points in each game, 5 catches for 52 yards against Tampa Bay, and 1 catch for 76 yards and a touchdown against Philadelphia. So not a lot of volume, but a big play guy, definitely boom or bust. Again, I caution you to wait and see how he's used when Tevin Coleman's back in there. But Eli Rogers, did we mention Eli Rogers?
Nope.
Eli Rogers definitely has looked good over the last couple of weeks. He was a guy that had a big first game. Obviously started the season with 6 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown. Looked like he was going to be the big slot guy. Then kind of fizzled the next couple of games and then had to miss a few games because of injury. Comes back after their Week 8 bye week with 10 catches for 145 yards and a touchdown in 2 games. So 20 points over the 10 points in each game. So definitely some solid production there. It looks like Ben is looking his way, and he is filling that slot role, particularly with Darius Hayward-Bay out and Stone Hands Coates not being able to do anything at all, ever. He never catches balls. 2 zeros, Steve. 2
zeros.
Yes.
Broken fingers. 1 0 for each broken finger.
1 0 for each broken finger. And by the way, Pittsburgh does have a pretty sweet schedule coming up with Cleveland and Indy in the next 2 games. So definitely
nice.
could do worse there for if you're trying to make a playoff run.
Absolutely. And then also we talked about this guy last week, Rashard Matthews, and all he did on Sunday was give you more reason to want to add him. So only 35.2% owned. Pick him up, put him on your roster. The way that this Titans offense is rolling right now, you can feel pretty comfortable throwing him into a lineup. He's worked his way all the way up to wide receiver 29 coming into this week. So that'd be another wide receiver I'd be looking at.
All right.
Tight ends.
Tight ends. Sorry. Yeah, let's talk about tight ends, because the one guy I want to lead off with here is a guy that you and I both love coming into the season, Ladarius Green. I think he's currently only owned in 7.8% of leagues, which is way too low. I think you're going to see his value rise pretty quickly. So I would get on the bus right now if I were you, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his first game back, he's already gotten a red zone target. So I think that is a very encouraging sign. He didn't look great going up and trying to get it, but this is his first game back. Give him a break.
Little rust.
Yeah, that's right. I like the way that the way that they were thinking about using him in his first game back already. So I totally agree. I'm going to be trying to pick him up in a lot of leagues because this Pittsburgh offense is going to turn the corner at some point and make that playoff run. And because of the wide receivers, how shaky that they've been, a really solid tight end presence could be something that could really benefit them. So I totally agree with him as well.
Cleveland is the worst team in the league against opposing tight ends. Indianapolis Colts are sixth worst in the league against opposing tight ends. Even the New York Giants, who was their Week 13 matchup, only 20th. They're still giving up 7.2. So they're not like, lighting the world on fire there. And then he's got the Buffalo Bills sitting at 10. He's got the Cincinnati Bengals, who are also not third worst against the tight end. So he's got some great matchups here. And then in Week 16, if you make it all the way, he's got Baltimore. So tough one there. But up until that point, you got some pretty sweet matchups. So definitely go get Ladarius Green. I also like Will Tye.
Yep, you might be on an island on that one.
Probably. But look, he's got 9 catches and 86 yards in his last 2 games. He seems like he's being worked in more. Sterling Shepard, your boy, has had 1 good game, 1 bad game in those 2 games. It looks like they're not really using any of the other New York Giant tight ends right now very well. And with Victor Cruz, still banged up, who knows when he's going to come back. He's a guy that takes a while to come back from injuries. I could just see Will Tye being a pretty good, option here for if you're rotating tight ends.
Yep, and in a memorandum of our good friend Sal that is not here tonight, I will say last night on watching that Monday night game, tight end's name I heard come up many times was Jarrell Adams for the New York Giants. So that would be just the only reason I'd be a little hesitant on Will Tye is because of how often I heard that name last night. It just, over and over and over again, it felt like. So if I would just be the only reason I would be hesitant on Will Tye, he does have good pass catching ability and pretty good talent there. The guy that I'm looking at for tight end is someone we've also talked about, and that's Cameron Brate. Only 36.6% owned still for some reason. Part of the reason that I like Jameis Winston so much this season is because of the amount of volume that he throws. And although Mike Evans does hog a bunch of that, he does not get all of it. And lately, Cameron Brate has been getting a lot touchdown in 3 of his straight games. He is tight end 5 in standard scoring and tight end 4 in PPR scoring over the last 4 weeks. Like we talked about Gronk most likely being out this week, and you're not being able to get your hands on Martellus Bennett, then Cameron Brate is someone you can pick up and you can instantly plug into your lineup. He's tight end 8 overall in the season. He does have a tougher matchup against the Chiefs this week. But, I mean, if you're able to even just stash him, we keep talking about the Tampa Bay playoff schedule, how they get the New Orleans Saints twice. And he is just somebody that I'm going to be wanting on my roster for these last few weeks of the fantasy season.
Definitely agree with you there. I think that Cameron Brate's a great tight end to sort of finish out the year with that schedule. So I completely agree. That's it for the waiver wire ads for us. Steve, just real quick.
Yep.
Are there any defenses that you like going forward? Any defenses that have good schedules? I know we never talk about it, but I feel bad that we never talk about it because some people do actually have questions.
I know Sal has been talking a lot about the Giants defense today and how good they've looked in their last few games. He was saying that they need to be picked up and they can be started for the rest of the season. Like I had mentioned earlier, I really like the Texans defense. Although they do play, they've got some harder defense or offenses that they play against. They play Oakland, San Diego, Green Bay, and Indianapolis. I'm not so much worried about the amount of points that they're giving up in those games as long as they're able to get some turnovers. And Phillip Rivers throws turnovers or throws interceptions. Andrew Luck throws interceptions. The Colts give up a ton of sacks. The Packers give up some sacks. The Chargers give up sacks. So you see those high-scoring offenses on, but I like the amount of the potential for turnovers in those games as well. So I like the Texans defense for the rest of the season. And then honestly, I don't have a ton of other ones off the top of my head because I don't pay too much attention to them going forward until I'm getting a little closer to the playoffs.
I definitely stream tight ends, or tight ends, defenses myself. So I sorry I put you on the spot there. I call me a homer, but the Patriots actually do have a really, really good schedule the rest of the way. We play San Francisco, New York Jets, L.A. Rams to finish out the fantasy season. And then in the playoffs, it's Baltimore, Denver, and New York Jets again. So none of that really scares you
That's great.
if you want one for the rest of the season. The Bears have an okay schedule, and their defensively has been pretty good. They have the Giants, which is a tough matchup, but Tennessee, San Francisco, Detroit. So none of those really scare you too much, although Tennessee's been throwing touchdowns like crazy. So I guess maybe you should worry about that. Anyway, I just wanted to get a little bit of defense in there for basically my wife because she asked.
All right. Well, you got a happy wife, happy life.
That is correct. All right. So A versus B, Steve. We're going to play a game. It's called A versus B. I think the title needs work, but if you've listened to this podcast before, you know that we're not very good with titles. So
That's right.
I'm going to give you a couple of players here, and from a specific player's position, and I'm going to give you some stats on each player, and then you're going to tell me which one you want for the rest of the season.
You got it.
All right. Are you ready? We're going to start off with quarterbacks, the easy ones.
Yeah, I'm ready now.
All right. So quarterback A has 122.2 total fantasy points. By the way, I'll be using FLAFFL scoring for all of these, which is what, a half point PPR.
Yep.
So 122.2 total fantasy points. He has 2,444 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. Coming up, for the rest of the season, he will play Minnesota, Atlanta, and Washington to finish out the regular fantasy season. And then in the fantasy playoffs, he's got Miami, New Orleans, and Seattle. His highest week was 24.2 in week 2, and his lowest week was 3.5 points in week 3. So big difference there between the high and the low.
That's right. Peaks and valleys.
That's right. All right. Quarterback B, on the other hand, has 116.6 total fantasy points. He's thrown for 2,117 yards with 10 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. On his schedule, he's got the Rams, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Baltimore Ravens. And then in the playoffs, he's got Arizona, the New York Jets, and the Buffalo Bills. His highest point total is 23 back in week 2, which was obviously a while ago. And his lowest total was 3.6 points back in week 6. So another guy with peaks and valleys. Which one of those guys would you like for the rest of the season, Steve?
For the rest of the year, I am going to have to go with quarterback A. Quarterback A for me, only because I know who it is.
Let's see. Now that's unfair. Do you know who quarterback B is?
I don't off the top of my head, but I know quarterback A is Carson Palmer.
It is.
And I know that I've got a feeling that they're going to finish their season very strong. And I would feel much more comfortable with him, just knowing that it was him, knowing that he was, I would just say it was him. I guess it's hard to, combat the other guy not knowing who it is, but I'm going quarterback A.
You're going with quarterback A.
Yep.
All right, so quarterback A played San Francisco in Week 10, had 14.6 points. We obviously know who that is. Quarterback B played San Diego in Week 10 and had 19.2 points. Steve, do you know who it is now?
Ryan Tannehill.
That is Ryan Tannehill. Interestingly enough that they are that close in points because I think Ryan Tannehill has been terrible this year. Or at least it seemed like it. Obviously, he had a good game this past week, and the schedule seems favorable. So I'm a little. I mean, obviously you know who it is, so you went with Carson Palmer, but that schedule's not too bad.
Schedule's not too bad, but now that I know it's Ryan Tannehill, I'm super happy I went with Carson Palmer.
I definitely think you made the right choice there. Definitely Carson Palmer's the way to go. So I like that as well. All right, let's move on to running backs here. Running back A has 115 rushes for 572 yards with 2 touchdowns. He also has 26 targets, 20 catches, 324 yards, and 1 touchdown receiving. His schedule coming up, kind kind of tough, if you ask me. Carolina, Los Angeles Rams, Detroit, and then in the playoffs, he's got Tampa Bay, Arizona, and Tampa Bay again. So could be good matchups there. 4 games with double-digit points, including a 30-point Week 9 contest. But the average of the remaining 5 games is 3.24 points, so pretty low there. Running back B, on the other hand, has 168 rushes, 720 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He has 29 targets, 22 catches, 124 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. His schedule is far better, in the playoffs, but for the rest of the regular fantasy season, he plays the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Packers. Then in the playoffs, you see the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Bengals. He also has 6 games with double-digit points, including a 31-point week in Week 9. And the average of the remaining 3 games is 6.47, so definitely better in his down weeks, and they've each had a big high week. What are you doing with running back A versus running back B?
The schedule for running back A seemed pretty nice, but the schedule for running back B also seemed pretty nice as well. I'm going to lean running back B in this one.
Running back B. All right. So just the schedule. Are you basing this completely on schedule?
The schedule seemed a little sweeter for running back B for me. I think I liked it just a little bit more. So yeah, that's what I'm going to base. You can't base it all on previous stats. It's in the past. You got to look at what's coming up. So you take a little bit of what they've done, and you got to translate it to the future.
I agree with you, but if I was trying to look at this without knowing the names, the 20 catches for 324 yards versus the 22 catches for 124 yards might sway me a little bit.
I'd like to see if there were any outliers on those catches.
I'm sure there are outliers on those catches. So you are going with running back B, which would be Lamar Miller.
All right, I'll take it.
Yeah, not bad. He definitely has a pretty good schedule coming up, and you got to hope that the lower usage that they are providing with him is going to help keep him a little fresher. It seemed to work when he was in Miami. But you are passing, Steve, on Mark Ingram.
I should have known that with the Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay. You should have known that, absolutely. Interesting. In case you haven't noticed, the game is based on trying to pick 2 players who have similar points. Obviously, Ingram has 113.7 versus Miller, which has 113.4. So far, I personally like Ingram going forward. I know that Hightower is cutting into his usage, but it's pretty clear to me that they're trying to limit Lamar Miller, as I said as well. I think they are trying to do it to keep him fresh, so I think that might work. But I think Ingram's going to be better down the stretch, and I love those matchups. And I like the fact that he's in the receiving game. I know Hightower's there, but I don't see him being used in the receiving game too much. So I like Ingram myself.
Yep, I definitely can't blame you. And it's getting a little scary with Lamar Miller, just seeing how nicked up and dinged up he has been the last couple weeks. I mean, he came out of the game again this last week and was out for a little while and came back after halftime for a little bit. But yeah, I would be a little concerned about the usage. And I'm not going to knock Mark Ingram, but I think I would still go with Lamar Miller. I'd feel a little more comfortable with his upside going forward.
All right, we move along. Wide receivers. Wide receiver A has 122.1 points this season. He has 81 targets, 49 receptions, 596 yards, and 6 touchdowns. His upcoming schedule, he plays Houston, Carolina, Buffalo, and then in the playoffs, Kansas City, San Diego, and Indianapolis. That Indianapolis matchup in Week 16 is pretty sweet. He has 1 game over 30 points, but he also has 2 games under 5 points. Meanwhile, wide receiver B has 121.1 points, so 1 point different there, 1 point less. He has 66 targets, 50 receptions, 629 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He plays Washington, Philadelphia, and then Houston, and then in the playoffs, Seattle, Chicago, and Minnesota. He also has 1 game over 30 points and 2 games under 5 points. So, Steve, which wide receiver are you taking?
That's a pretty tough one.
Pretty even, right?
Yeah. Which means that you gotta kind of resort to the schedule a little bit, and gonna I'm gonna have to go with wide receiver A. That you push that matchup with the Colts. For week 16, I think that's going to be a pretty nice one. So I am going to have to say wide receiver A and hope that it's who I'm thinking of in my head. So let's hear it.
Wide receiver A is Michael Crabtree.
Oh, I thought it was Amari Cooper.
You were
so
close.
That's pretty close.
Amari Cooper has actually passed Crabtree in fantasy points. It was obviously behind him quite a bit for a large part of the season, but Cooper has gone ahead by about 7 points now, so he is okay. Up there. Obviously, the schedule lends itself to both these guys being pretty good, though, so you can't really argue with that. And if you do get to the championship, you are just licking your chops. Literally, Steve, you will lick your chops. If you had
that might be difficult. Although did you see what I said in the chat today? I said if I made the falafel playoffs, I would shave the chops.
What? That's breaking news. How did you not lead the show with that?
That's how unlikely it is that I make the playoffs, that I'm able to so confidently put them up on the line. So, but it's out there. So I will do it if it does in fact happen, but it's not going to happen.
That is phenomenal. We will look forward to that. Wide receiver B in this case, by the way, was Devontae Adams. Amazing that such a good season he's had. I'm so intrigued by his value going forward. Tough, he's the third wide receiver, but he's producing.
Yeah, he's the third wide receiver, but he's definitely getting more looks than Randall Cobb, it would seem. So, I mean, he might be the third wide receiver only on the depth chart, only by name. But I mean, in Aaron Rodgers' head, he definitely is looking his way often, and in some big spots. I saw the game on Sunday; he was going to him a lot on third down. So it's not always busted plays or things like that. He's actually looking for him quite often.
Absolutely. All right, last one for us here. We will talk a little bit about tight ends. This tight end A has 85 points on the season. He has 49 targets, 35 receptions, 375 yards, and 5 touchdowns. It should be pretty clear to you who this is after I give you who he's going to play. So I'm not going to give you the playoff schedule. I will give you the Kansas City, Seattle, San Diego regular season left. He has touchdowns in 3 straight games. His highest yardage total is 84 yards, and the highest catch total is 7 on the season. Tight end B, on the other hand, has 82.5 points. He has 62 targets, 44 receptions, 425 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He plays the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, and the San Francisco 49ers in the rest of the fantasy regular season. But he hasn't had a touchdown since week 4. His highest catch total on the season is also 7, and that's for 88 yards. So pretty similar high marks for them. Are you going with tight end A or tight end B for the rest of the season? I think you know who tight end A is.
I do know who tight end A is, and I'm going to go with him because he's somebody that obviously I've talked about as Cameron Brate.
That's correct.
And you just got to love the amount of volume that he's getting in the red zone. So to already have 5 touchdowns, you know that the Buccaneers aren't going to really stop throwing the ball. They talked about it a little bit, but they haven't been able to do it. Their defense is not good enough to allow them to do so. So you know that he's going to have that opportunity. Already having 5 touchdowns is a little worrisome. You don't know how many more he's going to get, but he's going to have that opportunity. We've talked about his playoff schedule against the Saints twice. So definitely I would be going with Cameron Brate there over the 1 touchdown tight end number or letter B. I guess that'd be a letter.
Tight end B does have 3 touchdowns. He just hasn't had one since week 4.
Got it.
Which I'm curious about that because you are the type of guy who likes to predict the touchdowns based on their frequency and their history. I know you've said on several players we've talked about in the past that you don't think a particular guy that had 3 in the beginning of the season but hasn't scored since week 4. You usually say things like, "Oh, it's going to adjust." So I'm curious there.
That's very true. It's the positive regression. Is they are going to, return to the average of what they are. They're due.
They are due.
Basically, so they haven't had one in so long that they're due.
And this is another guy that we actually did talk about. Tight end B is Zach Miller from the Chicago Bears, who you mentioned earlier as a guy who could have a big, next few games with Alshon Jeffrey out. So both of these tight ends I don't think you can lose with, but I can see why you would go with Cameron Brate.
And that's what's great about Zach Miller is something that I've said about Dennis Pitta, and Zach Miller would probably take over for this point from Dennis Pitta because Dennis Pitta's kind of fallen off. He has 6 catches for 26 yards. What the hell is that? Anyway, is that he's becoming very fantasy relevant without those touchdowns. He hasn't scored one since week 4, yet I believe he's found himself up near tight end 10 heading into this week in 0.5 PPR scoring. So the fact that he's been able to do that just talks about the amount of volume that he is getting, the amount of yardage that he's, working with without having to score those touchdowns. He's getting catches and yards. So I like it when players are able to stay relevant without needing the touchdown.
I agree with you there. Definitely good, and hopefully we will see that positive regression you have talked about so many times. That about does it for us, Steve. I don't have any more. Do you have any more?
I've got nothing. I ran out of gas about 30 minutes ago.
Well, I'm sorry to have kept you this long. I did also apologize to the listeners for having to listen to you for that long.
Yeah, me as well.
Why don't we just get to finishing thoughts?
All right. Well, thank you for listening to us this long. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, you can do that at FLAFFL House. You can find our website like we talked about, FLAFFLHouse.com. You can also find us on Facebook, like our page there. Find us on Instagram. Just search for FLAFFL House anywhere and everywhere on the internet. And Sal, come back to us Thursday night. We miss you, buddy.
Yeah, Sal, I do miss you. I miss getting into some battles with you. As I've mentioned previously, Steve is just not the same because he's not very aggressive. He doesn't try very hard, and it's easy to push over. So please come back.
Is it the whimpering?
Yeah, the whimpering just it makes me feel bad. So
and that's part of the plan.
It's nice.
Part of my defense mechanism.
The proverbial fetal position. Sal, definitely come back soon. We miss you, buddy. Hopefully we'll have him later on this week. We will have a scheduled an episode for you on Friday, one way or the other, with Sal or without him. We will persevere. And I would like to also thank Sal for reminding everyone on the last episode that we love reviews. Because we do. We love reviews on iTunes. We wish more people would review us. In fact, I think everyone should review us, Steve.
I do agree. I don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah, it takes 2 minutes.
Yeah,
you can do it right on the podcast app or in iTunes. You can just go write a quick note, say how much you love me. You don't even have to talk about the other guys, which I know could be intimidating because you don't want to say bad things. So just talk about me.
There you go. Just talk about Kev. I'd love to see it.
That's right. But until next time, Steve, hit the button.